So with Ghazghkull, we're going to do something slightly different. What we're going to do is we're going to paint outwards rather than inwards. And what I mean by that is whenever you typically paint a miniature, you'll do things like the face and that last. But in order to get, be comfortable, especially if you've done like I haven't built the whole miniature, you want to paint from the inside details outwards rather than kind of trying to get your brush inside and this, that and the other. So we're actually going to start with Ghazghkull's Flesh. And the color we're going to be using is Creed Camo, and this is our kind of first coat, and we don't want to use too much of this. We just want a little bit on our brush, and we just want to find these areas of flesh. And as you can see, there's things like under here on the arm. We just want to start painting this Creed Camo all over his skin like this. And we can be a bit messy because we're going to tidy up everything later, but if we do all the armor first and then try and do all the flesh, we're going to run into troubles, and we're going to end up having to correct ourselves a lot later. So we just want to put this Creed Camo over all of the skin, and so you want to kind of be on the lookout for around on the arms and on the legs and on his back and of course on his face. And there's all these kind of little areas that you can see kind of like just down in there. You can see that's a muscle there. So we just want to throw this Creed Camo all over like that. And on the face, we want to be very careful because the top of his head is actually a metal plate. So we just want to be careful not to overwhelm any of the details as well on his head. So we just want to use the tip of our brush very gently like this, trying not to overwhelm the model too much. And if you put too much on, just use your brush to kind of pull it off, like I'm doing here. So I'm just doing my brush stroke, and if there's too much on it, I'm just going over it in the same direction each time, just to pull it off, and that way I don't get kind of any streaks or anything like that. So just want to keep going around doing this for all of Ghazghkull's Flesh. And next up, we're going to give all of that green flesh a highlight of WARBOSS green. Now, most of these highlights are on the face, so we just want to pick out all of the edges with this colour, like so, just leaving that Creed Camo in the recesses. And next up, we want to add a spot highlight of some thinned down NURGLING green. And for this, what we want to do is we just want to hit the absolute pinnacle of each of these edges. So we just kind of want it on the ear. We just want to kind of along the top here, like that, and all across the cheekbone, like this, across his nose, and along his lip. And next up, we want to create a rough mix of about 3 parts contrast medium, 1 part Ork Flesh, and 1 part Iyanden Yellow. And this is just going to act as a little kind of green glaze that we're going to put all over the skin, just to add a little bit more depth to it. So we just want to very, very carefully apply this colour all over that flesh that we've already added, and all over those highlights, just to kind of give it that real orkiness and blend all of those highlights together. I'm not using very much of this at once, just using a very sparing amount because I'd rather build up this colour carefully. Once that's dry, we're going to paint in the moor, but we're also going to paint in the scarring around where his head has been sewn back on. Spoiler alert. Should have said that first. Anyway, the colour we're going to be using is VOLUPUS pink. And what we want to do is we want to start with the moor. We want to just kind of get this paint all over the tongue and the inside of his mouth, so around the gums. We want to just be very careful around all that green. We want to make sure we get this all over his tongue. Like this. Additionally, we just want to take a teeny tiny bit of this VOLUPUS pink, and around the kind of seam on his neck, we just want to add a little bit of it running down the gap, like so. You just want to take your time doing this because you don't want, as I said, you don't want to get this all over that lovely green that we've already painted. And next up, we want to use a dot of PHALANX yellow just for his eye. And next up, we're going to use some Nazdreg Yellow for the teeth. And so what we want to do here is we want to take some on our brush, and we just want to make contact with the tooth at the top of the gum and then pull it down to the tip. So we just want to go like this and pull it down like that. Once that Nazdreg Yellow is dry, we want to take some thinned down Screaming Skull. And we just want to paint some highlights on the teeth. So we don't want to go all the way to the top. We just want to kind of stay towards the bottom. Like so. To make those teeth look nice and sharp, but kind of rotted at the gum. With that done, the next thing to do is to work on all the metallics around his face. And now, while this might seem counterintuitive not to do all the metallics at once, there is method to the madness, because we don't want to have to return to this area and risk kind of getting any paint on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some thinned down Iron Warriors. And we're going to paint this all over his skull plate. And any of the metallic details that are present around here. So things like this little contraption here poking out the side of his head, and the lens, and all that stuff. We just want to be very careful once we get close to that flesh. We want to just continue doing it like this. We also want to just hit this area here, just around his kind of head area. And next up, we want to give all of that silver a shade of Basilicanum Grey. We want to be very controlled here. So we just want to kind of very carefully put this Basilicanum Grey over those metallics. And again, we're just trying to be very, very careful so as not to get any of this on any of that flesh. Once that Basilicanum Grey is dry, we're going to give all of those silver details a highlight of Iron Hand Steel. So we've got some thin down on our palette. We just want to very carefully pick out all the edges of these metallic details. Like this. Once that Iron Hand Steel is dry, we're going to take some Gryph Hound Orange. And this is just to give it that kind of rusty appeal. And what we want to do is we want to take just a tiny little bit of this on our brush, and we just want to start running it into some of these recesses and just start building up that colour and just kind of overlap the Iron Hand Steel highlight a little bit just to give it that kind of that pop. And next up we want to take some Blood Angels Red, and we want to use this on the cable going around the back of his head, but also on the little lens just here on his eye. We just want to be very, very, very careful now because we've got lots and lots of nice colours on there. So just want to take our time. With that done, we're going to now move on, and we will come back and highlight that cable and the eye piece, but we don't need to do that for now. But what we are going to do is we're going to stick with our theme of caution, and we're actually going to paint the inside of his kind of mouth guard thing. And for this, what we're going to do is we're going to do an initial coat of Leviadon Blue, but we're going to do it in two different ways. So we're going to paint the whole of the inside of the mouth guard with Leviadon Blue. Then on the outside, this is where we're going to do the freehand checkered effect that you can see here on the model. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to do this by creating an absence of paint, which gives us the freehand rather than paint the freehand in afterwards. So we use our Leviadon Blue on the outside, and this is the pre-shade for those of you who have followed the channel for a while. And what we do is we kind of pick an area to start, and we're just going to start here. And we want to draw our first checker in like this. We want these lines to be nice and straight for now. Because we're going to add the kind of scuff marks and battle damage afterwards. So we paint this Leviadon Blue in first, as I say, as the pre-shade. I want to make sure we get it right in that recess. And we want to do this like this. I'm going to skip a bit and do our next checker here. Like so. So we just want to go around picking out this design as to how we want it. So similarly, the next checker starts here and it goes across like that. Like so. We just want to continue doing this all the way around. However, for the inside, we just want to give it a nice good coat of Leviadon Blue. Being extra careful once we get close to all that metallic and that silver that we've already added. Oh, that flesh that we've already added, I should say. Once that Leviadon Blue is dry, we're going to use some thinned down ULTHUAN Grey just to brighten up all those white checkers. So we just want to paint this ULTHUAN Grey all over these parts, and you can use this as a good opportunity to kind of just smooth out any of the squares if you kind of got a bit of a shaky line, rather than trying to overcorrect it with grey Seer. Once all that ULTHUAN Grey is dry, we're going to use some Skeleton Horde, and this is for the rivets on the white details. So we just want to add just tiny bits of it around each of these things. This to kind of give it that impression of the dirt building up around these things, these areas, like so. But that skeleton horde applied, it's now time to make the jaws black. And for this, we're going to be using black Templar. And so we're going to do this in a couple of different ways. So, for example, here on this flat edge, we just want to apply the black Templar along the center like this, just to keep that kind of that blue edge highlight that we've already got. Like so. And this will kind of do that highlight for us automatically, which is quite nice. It's quite courteous of the contrast to do that for us. So we just want to keep making sure that we're doing it like this, around this kind of edge. And then on the blue squares, we just want to block them in like so. Again, you can leave a little bit of the blue showing to kind of give it that impression of there being an edge. And next up, we're going to paint in these teeth before we finish off this whole section. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Gryph Hound Orange first, and then whilst it's still wet, we're going to apply some Blood Angels Red. So we're going to take the Gryph Hound Orange on our brush. We're going to do this on, a section by section. We don't want to do them all at once. So we take the Gryph Hound Orange and we just start applying it all over these large teeth. You just want to be careful as not to get any of this on any of those white bits on the guard that you don't want to suddenly have orange all over. But if you do, you can correct it with some ULTHUAN Grey easily enough. So make sure you've got this Gryph Hound Orange all over it. You want to go right up to the edge like that. Then once the Gryph Hound Orange is applied, you take your Blood Angels Red, and around about halfway, you just start applying this Blood Angels Red like this, all over the bottom of the tooth, until you're happy with it. If you want it to get a bit darker, just do another layer of Blood Angels Red down towards the bottom, like so. And once that's dry, we want to add just a little bit of Iron Hand Steel to the rivets. And just to the tips of any of the battle scarring that you can see on some of these teeth. Once that's done, it's time to move on, and we're going to actually start working on the trousers. And for this, we're going to be using just a couple of a 2-to-1 mix of Wildwood and medium. The medium is just there to give us a little bit more control over what we do around here, because we don't want kind of these trousers to be too dark. We just want them to be kind of a nice mid-brown. So the Wildwood and the medium, we just want to paste it all over these trousers, like so. And we add the medium just to make it a little bit thinner, so it's a little bit paler for what we want. With those trousers done, we're now going to start working on the armor. And what we're going to do is we want to take it very steadily, and we want to do this kind of almost like a panel at a time. But what we're not going to do is we're going to leave the 2 shoulder pads in this first instance, because they've got some freehand on them, and we don't want to, we want to kind of do those separately. But what we're going to want to do is, for the rest of the armor panels, we want to start with some Leviadon Blue, much like we did with the mouth guard. So we just want to take the Leviadon Blue on our brush, and we want to pick a armor panel that we want to start on. So actually I'm going to start around here on the chest. And so we just want to make contact with the model and just pull it down in these nice big broad brush strokes like this. We want to make sure that we get a nice even coverage with the Leviadon Blue all over these armor panels, like so. And next up, what we want to do is we want to block in all of these silver parts that go with the armor bits that we've painted. So this includes all the things like the claws on the feet around here, and also any kind of bobbly metal that you can see around the miniature. So you see kind of like here on the main part of the boot claw thing, whatever we're going to call that. We want to block that in with the Iron Warriors, like this. Once all that silver is dry, we're now going to start adding the black. And what we want to do is we want to add the black Templar to the flats of the blue armor panels. And we also want to add it to any kind of textured metal that you can see on the feet, for example, and on some of these. But we don't want to add any black to like these metal panels and stuff, the metal details that you'll see all over, like this big one on the shoulder and these things, because we're going to shade those with Basilicanum Grey. So what we want to do is we want to take our black Templar on our brush, and we just want to very, very carefully start applying this black Templar all over these armor panels. And if you can, just leave a little bit of the Leviadon Blue showing around the edges, so that this can establish our edge highlight for us. Kind of like this. Similarly again, along here on this armor panel. And then along here on the large flat. Kind of like this. And once that dry, it will give you a nice kind of dark black shiny panel with some of that blue shining through, and then we can apply our spot highlight to that panel just to give it that impression of the light catching off it. And you can use the black Templar to kind of make those highlights as big or as little as you like. Similarly down here on this kind of textured metal, we just want to add the black Templar all over it. With that black Templar applied, he's starting to look really cool. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move on to these shoulder pads. And this is so that we can just kind of finish off all of the kind of main bulk of the armor before we do the gun and the claw. So in order to do this left shoulder pad, the reason we've left this till last is because we want to do this checkered pattern on his shoulder pad. And we didn't want to have to kind of do this halfway through doing the rest of the armor. So in order to do this, what we want to do is we're going to take some Leviadon Blue once more, and we just want to kind of pick a point that is roughly in line with this part of the shoulder pad. And we want to draw a line that goes as straight as it possibly can all the way up to that recess, like that. Once we've got that line established, we want to draw another line going along the ridge of the shoulder pad, like so. Like that. And this gives us our kind of area within which to do this, the freehand. So we can then just block in the side of the shoulder pad. Like this. And next up, with these lines established, we want to create the grid. So what we do is we're sticking with the Leviadon Blue. We want to kind of at equidistant intervals, we just want to start drawing some lines that go straight across, connecting the two blocked in sections like this. So you got this kind of ladder effect there. And then what you do is you down the middle, draw a line to connect all of that, like so. Just want to make sure it goes all the way up to here, like that. And then lastly, we want to start blocking in the alternate ones. So we just want to start down here, and we just want to block that in. With the Leviadon Blue. Over on the other side, we want to start painting in the teeth freehand, and what we're going to do is slightly different to the checker. We just want to draw these as an outline using the Leviadon Blue. So you just want to make these kind of little uneven kind of triangles. Like so. We want to do 3 on the top, so sorry, 3 on the bottom, 2 on the top, and then 2 at the bottom back here. Once we're done with that, however, we then block in everywhere around these and leave the white on the inside. So we just, for example, start adding the Leviadon Blue all over the panel. Once all that Leviadon Blue is dry, you should look something like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover over those blue panels now with some black Templar. And in much the same way we did when we were doing the wider Armor panels, we just want to kind of try and leave the edges if we can, just to establish a bit of a highlight before we do the proper highlighting. And don't worry if the free-handed stuff looks too stark, because what we're going to do is we're going to do some Basilicanum Grey over the top of it just to take the edge off. Once all that black Templar is dry, we just want to use a bit of Basilicanum Grey, not very much, and we just want to run this over the top of those white bits just to take the edge off them a little bit. Like so. With that done, he's now starting to look pretty good across all of the armor. Now don't worry if it still looks a bit too blue, because we are going to add some battle damage and we're going to add some extra highlights to kind of make it look less blue. But now you've got that kind of nice dark shiny armor, and well, he's looking pretty fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to block in all of the brassy bits, and for this we're going to be using Retributor armor. And this is for all the kind of metallics around his body area. So the legs, the body, and the backpack, and all this bit, all these bits and bobs. And for this, we're going to be using Retributor armor. So we just want to get a good even coverage of this paint all over these sections. And it's things like these teeth, spikes that are coming off the shoulder pads, various areas like the triangles down here on the knee. And next up, we want to give all of those silver and gold details a shade of Basilicanum Grey. So you just want to pick an area to start, and I'm going to start up here. We can be quite liberal with this Basilicanum Grey because we want the metal to be nice and dark, but not as dark as it would be with Black Templar over it. Once all that Basilicanum Grey is dry, we're going to start highlighting up the rest of the model. And so we're going to be using Iron Hand Steel, and this is for all of the silver parts, but also for any kind of rents that you see in the armor that are all over the kind of torso and arms and legs. So we just want to take some Iron Hand Steel on our brush, and we just want to start picking out all of the edges across all of these things, like so. Similarly, again, for like the battle damage in the armor, just want to very carefully add this as an edge highlight. Like so. And we can add a couple of extra lines here and there. Similarly, along the kind of edges of these kind of large armor panels, we want to add the Iron Hand Steel again to each of these little bits like this. With all that Iron Hand Steel applied, we're now going to start highlighting the black. And for this, we're going to be using some thinned down Russ Grey. And this is our first part of the highlight for these sections. And what we want to do is we just want to kind of pick out the highlights that we've already left because of that Leviadon Blue. We just want to concentrate this towards the sharpest points, but a little bit longer than we would with a normal spot highlight. So, because we're going to add some Fenrisian Grey afterwards, just to kind of complete the effect. With that Russ Grey applied, we're just going to finish off highlighting all of that black armor with some Fenrisian Grey. We only want teeny tiny little bits of this as we do this, and we just want to pick the sharpest parts of any of these edges that we find. So we just want to add like this, tiny little amount, just almost on the corners of each of these armor panels and the rents in the armor and things like that. Like so. With all that Fenrisian Grey applied, we're now going to move on and we're going to finally start working on his weapons. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to use the gun arm, and we're once again going to go back to using Leviadon Blue. Now the process for painting the gun is basically the same as it is for the armor, but the reason we've kept it separate is just so that we can compartmentalize the miniature a little bit. So we're using this Leviadon Blue in much the same way that we have across the rest of the miniature. We just want to leave this icon here. And next up, we're going to paint in the silver barrels with some thinned down, you guessed it, Iron Warriors. Just want to use this also an opportunity to pick out these cables at the bottom Once all that Iron Warriors is dry, we're going to add some Black Templar to the model, and we're going to do this in two different ways. So for the armor panels of the gun, these blue ones, we're just going to do exactly like we've been doing with the armor. We're just going to apply the Black Templar all over the panel, trying to avoid those edges to establish our first highlight for each of these panels. However, on the metals, we're going to add the Black Templar in much the same way we would any kind of shade, but we want to leave the end of the barrel. So we just want to start painting this Black Templar all over the majority of the gun barrel, like so. Once all that Black Templar's dry, we're now going to do some edge highlighting on that gun. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get some Iron Warriors once again, and we're just going to edge highlight the gun barrels and any of the other metallic details around the weapon, like this. And once again, we're going to give all of those black panels a highlight of rust grey. And next up, we want to finish off the black on the gun with a spot highlight of some FENRISIAN grey. And this is mostly just for things like the rivets, the corners, like this. And next up, we want to paint in this lightning bolt insignia down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Skeleton Horde for the panel, and we're going to start at the top, make contact with the model, and put it down, like so. Once again, take a brush load, make contact at the top, and put it down. And next up, we're going to paint the lightning bolt itself with some Black Templar. And now we're going to move on, and we're going to paint this little square block of, I'm assuming, ammunition, but probably not. And we're going to be using Nazdreg Yellow for this. So we just want to make sure we get a good coverage of this all over the block, trying to leave the insignia untouched. And next up, we're going to paint the insignia just here with, again, Black Templar. And next up, we're going to paint the ammunition feeds both alongside here and the spent bullet casings coming out of the gun. We're also going to add some Retributor armor to the inside ring of each of these gun barrels, like so. I'm just going to add the Retributor armor to the bullet casings. And next up, we want to give those bullet casings and the barrels a shade. And what we're going to use is Guilliman Flesh and Basilicanum Grey. And we're going to do this in a slightly different way to how we would normally. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some Guilliman Flesh. I'm going to demonstrate here on this large case of bullets. And we just want to put the Guilliman Flesh all over the bullets like so. We just want to make sure we get this Guilliman Flesh all over like this. We want to do the underside as well. And the back. There we go. So with that Guilliman Flesh applied, we now want to take some Basilicanum Grey, and we just want to add this in various little places. So we want to kind of add it to the holes in the end of the bullets. And we also want to add the Basilicanum Grey in some of the recesses between each casing. Like so. That'll give us quite a nice worn out bullet effect. And you can build up the Basilicanum Grey to get that desired effect that you want, but always make sure that you just wash your brush or use a palette to make sure you don't contaminate either of your pots. Like so. Add a little bit more of this Basilicanum Grey to the top here. Like that. Similarly, on the ends of the barrels, we want to take the Guilliman Flesh and we want to put it all over the end of the barrel like so. You want to build up a nice good coverage of it like that, and then we take the Basilicanum Grey and we add a nice blob of it right in the middle to make it nice and dark, and then we can just add it around the outside just to make that barrel look nice and grimy like that. And now we're going to highlight all of the gold, and for this we're going to be using Liberator Gold. So we just want to effectively just pick out every single one of the edges with this colour. Like so. And there's method to the madness. This is also the opportunity to highlight the rest of the gold that we've hidden around the model. Painted around the model. So once again, we're just going to hit all of the edges with the Liberator Gold. With all of that gold highlighted, it's now time to move on. And for what we're going to do next is we're going to paint all of the red details, excluding the claw, because that's a whole other thing. So what we want to do is we want to paint the red of the tabard, the cables, the big cables, and some of these icons and fetishes that you can see around the model, and also all of the strings that are holding things together. So there's like one round on the gun, there's a couple holding these skulls on, and there's one holding this big bullhorn skull thing at the top. And the colour we're going to use is Flesh Tearers Red. So we just take a good bit of it on a brush, and we're going to do this for the tabard, I think. And so we want to just kind of pick a point, and usually it's good to start with a recess and pull it to the edge. So we're going to start with the recess here, make contact with the model, and pull the colour down across like so. And we just want to keep doing it like this. Once all those red details are dry, we're going to give them all a bit of a shade, and we're going to be using a roughly 6:1 mix of contrast medium and Cygor Brown for this. And we want to do this over all the red details other than the red tab bar, because we're going to do that slightly differently, but we are going to still use Cygor Brown for it. So using this mix, we just want to kind of pick an area to start. And I'm going to start on this cable here. And we just want to paste this mix all over the cable like so. And this just darkens down that red considerably, but Cygor Brown kind of really brings out that red highlight. And this way we don't have to kind of do a kind of edge highlight on these cables, for example, if we do it this way. Still continuing with that same Cygor Brown mix, or if you've run out, you need to make another one, 6:1. On the cape, we just want to run this down the recesses. So we just want to leave the most prominent parts of that red. Once all that Cygor Brown is dry, we're going to give all of the red details a highlight. And for this, we're going to be using some thinned down Evil Sunz Scarlet. So on the cape, we just want to pick out the edges, like along here, and along this large area like this. On the kind of cables and strings and things that are holding together, we just want to pick out the individual strands with this color. With all that red done, we're now going to move on and we're going to do all of the bone details. So this includes the big skull on the top, the skulls hanging off of his armor, and the teeth hanging down here. We're going to leave these big teeth here for now because we're going to do all of this claw as one separate thing. So the color we're going to use is we're going to use Skeleton Horde for this. And it's very, very simple. We just want to paint the Skeleton Horde all over these details like this. Similarly for the top skull up here. And next up, we're going to use some WYLDWOOD, and for this, we're going to be doing this all over the string here, holding up the teeth around his waist. Like so. We're also going to be just using this WYLDWOOD very sparingly to add any kind of depth that we need to the darkest areas of any of the bone details that we've painted in. So things like in the kind of the hollow parts of these fangs down here. But also up here on the big skull, there's this large recess down here by the nose. And we just want to add this WYLDWOOD in here. Like that. And then just any of the kind of deepest crevices. You only want to use a tiny little amount whilst you do this, because you don't want to overwhelm any of the kind of skeleton horde that you've already put in. But we just want to, like so, just pick out these parts. So before we highlight any of these bone details, we of course need to do the big horns. And what we're going to do is we're going to coat the whole thing in contrast medium and then use Skeleton Horde, Aggaros Dunes and Wildwood to create the fade that you can see on the box art. So what we do is we take the contrast medium and we just whack this all over the horn. And you can be quite liberal with this. Make sure you get it all over every single side with it. Once that's done, you take some Skeleton Horde and you kind of up to, that's maybe a little bit too much Skeleton Horde, we take it up to about here and we paint the Skeleton Horde up to there and do it on again all sides like so. Just make sure you're pulling the darker parts of the contrast to there, further away. We then take the Aggaros Dunes and we add it all the way along up to where the colours will meet, like so. And then lastly, we take some Wildwood and we add it to the tip. Like this. And then you use some contrast medium just to soften out those areas where the transitions happen. Like that. With those horns done, it's now time to highlight all of the bone, the horn, and this little panel down here, anywhere that we've kind of made this Skeleton Horde color. And for this color, for this highlight, we're going to be using Screaming Skull. So as per usual with any edge highlight, we just want to take a tiny little bit of it on our brush and we want to start picking out all of the edges on all of these details like this. I'm going to pick out these rivets down here and places on the skull at the top. As well as any of the kind of edges along these horns. And you want to do it all the way up so it's the same consistent highlight across the whole part of the horn. With all of that done, it's now time, finally once and for all, to move on to the claw. And so what we want to do is we want to start with the casing and then we'll do the blades itself. And so the casing, what we're going to do is we're going to give it a pre-shaded colour of Gryph Hound Orange. And what we want to do is we kind of want to pick an area to start. And I'm going to start actually, I think, on this big wide open one here. And this is just the pre-shade, but we want this to be nice and smooth because we don't want to get too much colour on here at once. So we just want to pick a point, and this recess just here with the battle damage is a good place to start. So we're going to make contact with the model and we're just going to pull this Gryph Hound Orange down like this. Same again, just grab a little bit more on the brush, pick a point, start, and pull it down. And we're just going to keep going like this along the whole of the flat casing. And next up, we're going to cover over all of that Gryph Hound Orange with some Blood Angels Red. And once that Blood Angels Red is dry, we're going to draw in the free hand on the claw casing. And so this is yet another grid, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to just draw out each square individually because it kind of goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So what we want to do is we want to kind of pick roughly where we want to start, and then we kind of want to go around here. We just want to draw in the square. Like this. And then we want to do it again and again and again and again and again and again. So we've drawn one. And then we want to draw in the next one. So we want to kind of come down to about here. To draw in the next one. We can block these ones in. Like so. So then the next square starts in line with this and finishes in line with that one. So we're going to kind of turn the model sideways. And we want to draw the next one. Once those checkers are dry, what we're going to do is we're going to glaze all over those flat panels of the claw, and we're going to use a 6:1 mix of contrast medium and flesh tearers red. And so we grab this paint on our brush, and then we just pick an area, and we want to do this all over, including all over the checkers, because this will just take the edge off the black a little bit, as well as blend it into the red. So we just paste this all over, like so. And so next up, what we're going to do is we're going to do the Black Templar fade across the casing on the red claw. So what we do is we create a 4:1 mix of contrast medium and Black Templar. And then we just want to build up that colour at the bottom of the claw here, like so. Slowly taking over those bottom black bits, and then we just colour in the underside of the claw with this mix. Like so. And then what we want to do is grab just a little bit of medium on its own and just use this to feather out that black a little bit at the bottom. With the casing done, we're now going to block in all the metallic details, and for this we're going to be using some thinned down Iron Warriors. And it shouldn't be a surprise to you at this point that it's Iron Warriors, because it's every single time. With all that Iron Warriors applied, we're now going to apply some shading to all those metallics. And the colours we're going to be using are Guilliman Flesh, Basilicanum Grey, and Gryph Hound Orange. And we want to kind of make a blend of these to create that impression of dust and dirt and rust kind of building up on the claws and in the kind of recesses around here. So I recommend taking this a claw at a time. And what you want to do is you want to start with the Basilicanum Grey. You just want to get a good coat of this all over that claw, like so. Like this. So with that Basilicanum Grey applied, give your brush a quick wash, and then grab some Guilliman Flesh and start applying this in the areas that you want to have kind of some dirt or some rust applied. So you just want to start dabbing this in around kind of the claw blades, like that, kind of areas on the flat. Like so. And around any kind of built up areas, like in the corners, around like the rivets and stuff. And then just to add that element of rust, we take a little bit of Gryph Hound Orange and you just apply it where you want to find the rust, like so. And next up, we want to give all of those silver details a highlight of Iron Hand Steel. Like this. We can also use this as a good opportunity to colour in any of these rivets on the claw casing, as well as to highlight any of the battle damage that we've got around the claw. You can also use this as a good opportunity to try and add a bit of battle damage here and there, so just draw tiny little scratches. With that Iron Hand Steel applied, you can see the claw looks absolutely incredible, particularly with that bit of battle damage added there on the casing. Right, so we're going to move on to the last bit of the model before we move on to the base, of course, and that is these kind of big teeth here on the claw. And we're going to be using two colours. We're going to be using Skeleton Horde and Wildwood. And the first colour we do is Skeleton Horde, and we want to fair whacker this, not that much, and we just want to paint this Skeleton Horde all over the tooth on both sides, like so. Give the brush a quick wash, and then whilst it's still wet, we take a bit of Wildwood and we just dab it on at the base. And with those teeth done, well, the model is finished, apart from, of course, the base. But I think you agree, he looks stunning already. I'm so chuffed to bits with him, and a very, very fun model to paint. But it's not over yet, so we're going to paint the base. So the first colour we're going to do is we're going to paint all the stone, and this we're going to be using Basilicanum Grey. And we just want to pick a bit of stone to start on, and so I'm going to start on the flagstones here. So I'm just going to start painting this Basilicanum Grey all over these flagstones, like so. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying to get these nice smooth brush strokes out of it. So I'm just making contact with the model and then I'm pulling it down. So once again, make contact and pull it down. Like so. Just keep going. Once all that Basilicanum Grey is dry, we're going to fill in all of the soil with some Wildwood. We're going to be really liberal here. You want a nice dark brown, even coverage all over. And next up we want to paint in all the metallic parts with some Iron Warriors. And next up we want to paint in all of the bullet casings with some Retributor armour. And next up, we're going to paint the marine helmet just under here. Now, you could paint this as any chapter that you want, but I'm going to paint this guy as a Space Wolves helmet because, well, he's opposite Ragnar in the box, so it should really be a Space Wolf. And so the colour I'm going to use is Space Wolves Grey. And I'm just going to very carefully paint this Space Wolves Grey all over the helmet. Like so. And the next base coat we're going to add is from Skeleton Horde for the skull at the back, just here. And next up we're going to paint the lens of the Space Marine helmet with a bit of Blood Angels Red. This is very, very tricky to do with the model pre-assembled. Just want to brace our hand very steadily and just guide the Blood Angels Red in like this. And so next up what we're going to do is going to paint all of the metallics with some Basilicanum Grey, and this is just to darken them down, give them a bit of texture and shade. And next up what we want to do is we want to add a tiny little bit of Black Templar to the ridges of these kind of little craters that we've got here, just to kind of give it that kind of that blackened, just exploded look, like this. And next up we're going to use some Stirland Battlemire just to block in the rest of the base and pull the whole thing together so that the two browns kind of meet. And we want to push this Stirland Battlemire right up to where the moulded base meets the flat base. Once all that's dry, we're going to give the whole base a dry brush of Tyrant Skull just to blend all of these colours together and unify them, make it appear as if the same dust has blown up all over this model. Like this. We just want to hit all of these areas, including just on the metal bits. Like this. With that dry brush applied, I've added some tufts just to break up the brown, and the last thing to do is to give the rim of the base a coat of Black Templar. So there you have it, he's all done, and honestly I think this is one of the most spectacular models that Games Workshop has ever made, and it's been an absolute pleasure to paint him and show him off for all of you. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you find something useful within it. A lot of different techniques used for this one, but it really shows how far contrast paints can go. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff for me. I really appreciate all of the support I get from all of you who have already subscribed, and I'll keep making videos and I'll see you in the next one.